Hey guys, Spirit of the Lie here. In this video, we're going to take our annual look at the best civilizations in Age of Empires 2 as of 2024, according to the most recent stats. As usual, we're going to be taking the perspective of using ranked online data for this, focusing on 1v1 Arabia games where player elo is 1200 or up. Admittedly, that might sound a little arbitrary, and the idea behind 1200 plus is that it's the top 20 to 25% of the ranked player base, so it's focusing on the most competitive quartile. While Arabia is the focus, of course, as it's by far the most popular map, played almost exactly as much as all other 1v1 ranked maps combined. Even with both of those filters, we end up with a solid 252,000 games to draw from over the first couple months of 2024, which isn't just enough to separate these strong civs from the weak ones, but even start to see patterns in what types of civs they do well against and phases of the game a civ tends to do well. With that, let's see if any of your favorites make it into the top 10. Starting off at number 10 is the Persians. They've had quite the revival in late 2023, jumping from being well below average to pushing top tier. That was due to a few changes, with the return of their faster working town centers in Dark Age, 3 new civ bonuses, of which one was quickly removed, a new unique tech, giving them arguably some of the best castles in Imperial Age, and the unique Savar, replacing the Paladin as more of an anti-archer specialist. This has made them very strong at most elo levels, and even phases of the game if we look at their win rate within games of different lengths, which can highlight periods a civilization is particularly strong and able to close things out, or is somehow falling behind and players are resigning a lot. Their faster working town center and extra resources from the start of the game lead into a very quick uptime, with then scouts being by far their most common opening, though with an archery range into skirmishers or archers being occasionally seen as well. We have to be a little careful reading this chart as it involves scraping recorded games and the sample sizes are relatively small as it throws out a lot of games for not neatly fitting into a category, but can give us a hint of what players might be opening with. Castle Age is when it really comes together for Persians though, growing to a plus 15% work speed on each town center, knights with extra attack against archers, camels as an option to counter strong knight civs, and even cavalry archers with Parthian tactics in Castle Age as a wild card to throw in against spear units. Overall, they've just had a very nice revival, settling as a borderline top 10 civ with a particularly flexible array of cavalry options and a decent economy. Next up at number 9 is another civ generally played with an eye toward cavalry, which is a bit of a theme of this list, and that's the Slavs. Like Persians, Slavs were a big winner from the Mountain Royals DLC balance changes, restoring their plus 15% farming speed bonus, which has been very fruitful and yielded some much better stats immediately. Interestingly, it's in the intermediate elo range that Slavs are recently doing best, tapering off at very high and low ratings, but that simple eco bonus of faster farms powering usually a scout rush and knights seems to be working for the majority of players. They actually get out to a bit of a slow start, aging up about 15 seconds later than Persians on average as an example. But once the power of farming kicks in on top of cheaper siege, the boyar for some extra melee punch, or even infantry now and then as a secondary focus, you end up with a pretty strong late castle into Imperial Age. Moving on to number 8, we have the Celts. Infantry in general has been pushed more and more over time, and arguably Celts have benefited from that, with men-at-arms being their most popular opening at the 1200 level and up, and is a civilization that seems to be thriving particularly at high skill levels. Their reputation as a bit of a meme civilization thriving at all-in strategies sort of shows up in the stats, with those shorter sub-30-minute games going disproportionately in their favor, and longer, more drawn-out games making them look more average. This is in at least part powered by their strong wood bonus and siege units, in combo with their faster infantry and the always dangerous Woad Raider, which has been buffed considerably over the last few years. One thing that makes Celt stats a little tricky to read is the player Huang, who, while he doesn't play only Celts, plays them as well as AoE2 in general a lot, with about 10% of the 1900 plus rated games with Celts being attributable to him. What's more, he has a very good personal win rate with them. That gets drowned out in the thousands of 1200 plus game data, but for 1900 plus specifically, he's pushing that bar up single-handedly by almost 1%. Either way, playing aggressively with Celts certainly seems to be successful, enough to push them up to number 8 overall. Next up is another Age of Kings civilization excelling at siege, this time with the Mongols. Mongols actually have a few similarities with Celts, having both their greatest competitive advantage in the early game and doing progressively better at higher ratings. Mongols go about it in a very different way though, having their faster hunting bonus translate into a sub 9-minute average feudal time, faster than other quick advancers like Lithuanians, Khmer, and only slightly behind Malay. If we just look at only 1900 ELO and up though, they actually advance faster than Malay by a second, with a blistering 8:22 average feudal time. After accounting for the time to advance and loom, that's just under 17 villagers on average. That extreme aggression leads to fast games, where they catch an opponent unprepared and end the game in early feudal, with a nearly 70% win rate in games ending before 20 minutes, rising to 80% for the top 1% of players. To be clear, that doesn't mean they win 80% of games in under 20 minutes, which would be completely insane. It means if the game ends in under 20 minutes, it'd be a good bet the Mongols won. That said, the longer the game goes on and Mongols transition to their knights, camels, crossbows, etc., they start to become a lot more average. While Mangudai are quite strong and mobile, in 1v1s at least, they're just a bit too hard to build up every game. And the idea of Mongols as a deathball Mangudai in Siege Civilization is a little more apt for closed maps and team settings, which again is something you could easily say of the Celts and their late game as well. Moving on to number 6, we have yet another Age of Kings civilization, this time the Vikings. Again, this all comes down to economy, with free wheelbarrow and handcart universally seen as probably the single strongest eco bonus in the game, not just for the free resources, but how many villagers that puts you ahead of opponents by using that town center work time elsewhere. While technically they're an infantry civilization, archers are in fact a more common opening than men-at-arms, and I'd say are more closely associated with the civilization overall. The nice thing about a strong eco bonus though is you can kind of get away with anything, and whether it's infantry, crossbows, or even knights, Vikings just feel a step ahead. Of course, it does take a while for that economy to kick in, with their best performance in games where everyone makes it to Castle Age, and they're particularly strong in that late Castle to early Imperial Age window. The Berserk is also a low-key dangerous unit to have in your back pocket against trash units in 1v1, with a number of quiet improvements being made to that unit in the last few years. Next up, at number 5, we have the Franks, as yet another civ from Age of Kings, giving us now a streak of 4. The biggest surprise here might be that they aren't higher, having a simple but strong game plan of scouts into knights, supported by basically every bonus they have. Following their solid early feudal age, they then have a great early castle age knight spam, with then cheaper castles giving a way to complement that mobility. One thing worth pointing out is that while Franks overall have dropped in their standing a bit lately and are no longer the undisputed number 1 civ overall, they're still great for sub 1000 ELO players, being I'd say still the easiest civ to pick up at that level. That's certainly where they're at their most popular, falling in pick rate at every new bracket as you go higher. Still, they're unquestionably a very solid choice on Arabia, and of all the civs on this list, probably have the reputation as being the most tryhard, despite only being number 5 in the stats. Moving on to number 4, we finally break our streak of Age of Kings civilizations with one of the newest additions, the Romans. Romans are just dependably solid across the board, above average in games of any length and at any elo. That's maybe not incredibly surprising, given their 5% faster working villager bonus, which is obviously a big help for everyone at every stage of the game. What may be more surprising to some is that they're not just doing this with infantry alone. While men-at-arms are a popular opening of course, with up to +2/+2 armor in feudal age making them a headache to deal with, Romans are opening scouts a not insignificant portion of the time, and archers are also seen, I think even more often than the data here suggests, as archers could easily follow 3 men-at-arms, but would count as a men-at-arms opening. There's a bit of the Vikings wheelbarrow effect at play here, where a good economy means you can kind of do anything and it feels viable, where Romans could suit a player with either a cavalry or crossbow preference. As we'd expect as well though, they definitely have a specialty against enemy infantry civs, and even with very small sample sizes, their best matchups are dominated by infantry civs as well as Byzantines, funny enough. The fact their champion line is replaced by the legionary having several advantages over other champions, including bonus damage against infantry, makes that a comfortable matchup in those longer games. Next up, entering the top 3, we're back to Age of Kings civilizations again, this time with the Teutons. Considering Slavs and Vikings made it into the top 10, powered by their strong farming economies, it's maybe not surprising that Teutons are here as well. While they lack a Dark Age bonus, they make up for it with massively discounted farms and extra melee armor and conversion resistance on their knights, giving them one of the best knight spams in the mid-game, which coincides with their win rate versus game length data, implying that's when they really hit their stride. Great knights and booming are a simple recipe for a top 10 civilization, as we've seen a few times now. Continuing with that theme, moving on to number 2, we have the Huns. Now, while faster created knights and not needing houses gives them a solid economic foundation for a knight spam with a very similar profile in the stats to Teutons, Huns then add in a good archery range, particularly with the potential to transition to discounted cavalry archers. That slightly more complex playstyle of making transitions between stable and archery range units may be partly why Huns are not quite as dominant at lower levels, as that introduces a bit of a learning curve, even if no houses seems like one of the most beginner-friendly bonuses you could have. At higher ratings though, Huns are top tier, and have been for years, with a combination of flexibility on top of some very simple bonuses, with no houses, cheap cavalry archers, and faster working stables. I am a little sad their top performance hurts their chances of ever getting step lancers though, as that would be very thematic, but it doesn't really seem like Huns need any extra help these days. Now, before we get to the current number 1 civilization, I have a couple of quick honorable mentions if we were to broaden our scope from Arabia to all maps and ratings out of curiosity, as doing so would introduce 2 different civilizations into the top 5 that struggle on Arabia specifically, but should get at least a passing mention. The first is Bohemians, who would be number 3 overall if we included all maps and ratings. While they're far too slow to thrive on open maps like Arabia, having a pretty rough time of things in especially shorter games, if we look at closed maps like Arena, they're easily top tier. This is after some recent nerfs as well, targeting their Hussite wagon with less HP, attack, and a slower training time. Against archer civs, it looks like those nerfs may not be enough, as their high armor and HP makes them hard for especially archers to deal with, though with hit and run, they can even be a pain for knights as well. In a similar vein, maybe surprisingly, Turks would be number 4 overall, again if we included all maps and skill levels combined. Once considered a bottom 5 civ, Turks have really run with a scout line identity, combined with their always potent gunpowder. Again, that plays well on Arena, as by far their best map, but has never translated as effectively onto Arabia. But finally, going back to the Arabia 1200 plus elo, the absolute number 1 civ, now 2 years in a row, is the Hindustanis. What's funny is they started 2023 and 2024 as the top civ, yet if we checked in the middle of last year, they were around 30th thanks to a weakening of their villager discount. Even a partial restoration of that bonus has immediately catapulted them into the top spot again though. The benefit of cheaper villagers is obvious, saving food right from the start of the game, with then scouts being by far their most popular opening. Cheaper villagers help again even more in that Castle Age boom phase though, which we've seen be important for several top 10 civs. Of course, what makes Hindustanis particularly dangerous is how well they work as an anti-meta pick, having strong camels to deal with popular knight-spamming civilizations, as well as the Ghulam to deal with archer civs thanks to its high armor and bonus damage. It shouldn't be surprising then that their worst matchups are almost entirely infantry civs, but even then Hindustanis have good gunpowder if they can get to it. In fairness, they only have a 55.7% win rate, so I wouldn't say they're broken, but have certainly benefited from a few design choices that make them not just the best 1v1 Arabia civ, but also if we look across all maps and skills put together. So they're pretty unquestionably number 1 at the moment according to the stats. That's all for this one though. Big thanks to James, Jared2142, Jockster, Justin, Samantha, Steven, Woodruff, and corporate sponsor OpMain, as well as everyone else on Patreon for their amazing support. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.